not everyone is in agreement that there's actually a genocide happening against the Uyghurs in China. Now, how can anyone deny it, you might ask? Because, like many of the narratives these days, it keeps shifting. What was once a genocide, which to many of us means the mass murder of a group of people, shifted to a cultural genocide when it was pointed out that there hasn't been a mass refugee crisis with hundreds of thousands or even millions of Uyghurs trying to flee China. We haven't seen massive graves with bodies in them or images of thousands of desperate women and children fleeing. Instead, we just see satellite images of buildings that we're told are prison camps or images of hundreds of men, clearly prisoners, being moved. But how are images of prisoners, of which we have millions in our own country, proof of a genocide? It isn't. So the narrative shifted from genocide, where people are being imprisoned and killed, to preemptive genocide, with claims of China not allowing the Uyghurs to have children. But then the narrative shifted again when it was pointed out that when Chinese citizens were prevented from having more than one child, the Uyghurs were exempt. In fact, they were also exempt from the two-child policy when China relaxed the rules. Rules every person in China, except for certain minority groups, including the Uyghurs, were subject to. And when China moved to a three-child policy for all, that's when they enforced the rule on the Uyghurs, a rule everyone in China has to live by. So when it was pointed out that it wasn't directed at the Uyghurs at all, the narrative shifted again to cultural genocide, which means you're not killing the people, you're just killing their culture. You're wiping out their language and their religion. Now that's a massive shift, going from claiming millions are being murdered or prevented from having children to language and religion being banned. The narrative is now shifted again. Once actual journalists, one of which we're about to talk to, began traveling to the region rather than just repeating the same talking points as every other outlet, images of their travels began to surface naturally. And in those images, you can see the Uyghur language is everywhere, on every sign. Mosques are also abundant in the region. If China is clamping down and attempting to eradicate the Uyghur religion and language, they're doing a piss poor job of it. So this week, Uyghur slave labor began trending again after a UN report was released claiming the treatment of the Uyghurs may be a modern form of slavery. Now, first of all, look at the wording. Maybe? I thought this report was to be definitive and finally put the issue to rest. Instead, the report cites Uyghurs leaving the camps and being given jobs in other parts of the country. They don't have evidence they're being forced or can't refuse the job. They just say the fact they're being moved around the country for work is an indicator of slave labor. Well, plenty of people are moved around for work in this country. Many of them are even government employees. Last year, AP did an on-the-ground investigation. At least they actually went to investigate. And they concluded there are no camps. But they say they must have been there at some point because look at the old buildings with the barbed wire fences. And they reported seeing Uyghurs dancing and drinking and flirting, but they concluded they must be hiding their sadness. So if none of this is true, why are we being told these things?